also on the point of politics in these states, um, depending on how influential the West remains in the states where the BRI is, China will become the hegemony. This is my whole argument, is that through the Belt and Road, China is creating a new world system, where it will be the core and it will have these peripheries which are all indentured to it, and China calls the shots in them. And this is all for economic gain. And economic gain, but also if it exports its ideology, like the way Iran does. Iran exports its revolutionary Islamic ideology to get itself more credibility on the world stage. Like, oh, we're not the only ones who believe in this. So do the Houthis. So does Hezbollah. So it's either all of us are this way or none of us are this way. Iran's a lot more aggressive and difficult in this regard. But maybe I don't know that much about China's history of trying to export its model. But this is, in the least, this is what I can tell you, is that it looks like China has the components to become a hegemony in a new Belt and Road initiative. I call it the BRI bound world system. So it's going to be a world system comprised of these states which have a lot of, which have at least one Belt and Road project occurring right now. And how a state becomes peripheralized, so it becomes a periphery of China, is after what world systems theory outlines the indicators that have to be met. We talked about production dominance, economic dominance, new modes of operation. There's also a very important factor in all hegemonies have had across the ages, shall we say. So world systems analysis essentially is a historical analysis tool. It's not only about international relations, it also looks at history, at long periods of history. And the first hegemony was the United Provinces, which is today the Netherlands. They rallied peripheries not only economically and with law, but also around an anthem, a cause, a general interest. And the general interest of the United Provinces at the time was state sovereignty, right? So Treaty of Westphalia, respect my borders, I'll respect yours. The U.S.'s general interest is democracy, and whereas, we have to spread democracy around the world. China's general interest is infrastructure, because China has the capacity and has the surplus production in steel and other infrastructure, not raw material, and has the framework to export a lot of infrastructure and to construct a lot of infrastructure at a time when the world needs a lot of it. In Asia, it needs. I saw like an estimate of billions of dollars of necessary infrastructure investment. Africa, same thing. Certain Asian states alone cannot satisfy their own infrastructure needs. Cambodia, Myanmar, Laos, Nepal, they don't have the revenue to fund their own infrastructure needs. Japan, of course, does. This is why Japan is not as influenced by China. But these countries need China, and China's general interest is infrastructure. It's not saying, you should respect women, or you should, this is the Declaration of Human Rights or whatever. It just says, hey, you need a railway, and I can build it for you. But also, of course, a consequence of this is that in its pursuit of the most efficient ways of governance, I think it regards democracy as secondary in importance. As long as the policy gets passed, I don't think it cares how it gets passed, as long as it gets passed.
It's interesting when you compare the philosophies of these general interest, because like the U.S. is this sort of idea of democracy and power to the individuals,
individual liberty, freedoms, that
kind of
stuff.
The Netherlands, for what it's worth, sovereignty and respect for that. And like China's is like this very Marxist, materialist means of production philosophy, right? That has nothing to do with the people.
Oh, well,
it's all about like creating material goods, and which of course benefits China, but also it's just a very materialistic Marxist philosophical idea when compared to what the U.S. and the Netherlands.
That's interesting, because I was thinking when you were talking, Dofi, that like, infrastructure is not really an ideology, but you're saying, Matt, that you think it is.
It sounds from what you're saying, Tofi, that it is ideological. That infrastructure is like the goal is more material goods versus a sort of liberty or sovereignty idea.
Even though those rails that they are building are garbage and fall apart. The bridges fall apart.
Yeah, but they do benefit China, so it doesn't matter.
Well, I've never really thought about it from that point of view. When I think Marxism, I think means of production, and yeah, China does have the means of production in this regard. So, but certainly, I would agree with you that China's general interest is more materialistic than other hegemonies of the past. Unless you consider that the state as a material, structure would also safeguard whatever material production is going on inside it, which makes the United Provinces also materialistic in what it propagated. And also the US idea of democracy and human rights maybe wanted to, maybe was leading up to the optimal functioning of a state is one that is democratic and respects human rights. So the states that would have the highest revenue and the highest human development index are those that have human rights and are democracies, which is true for the most part.
Right. Although I would say correlation, yes. Causation, perhaps, is a bit more complex.
Exactly. International affairs is it's not STEM. There's many things that could be happening, and when we try to draw little theories here and there. Yeah.
So according to your research, what ultimately will happen as China becomes more of a hegemony, as it gets all of these more and more periphery states under its control, as that rams up against sort of a Western democratic hegemony? These two competing powers.
Yes. So just off the bat, I can tell you that Mandarin will be more widely spoken.
Chandama.
The phrase "okay," you know what I mean? Okay. People use it a lot, even in Japan, even where I'm from. Just okay, and I think the okay is like a nugget of American linguistic hegemony. So I think in maybe 20, 30 years time, if things remain the way they are, you'd have maybe Kenyans saying "xie xie" or Pakistanis, because certainly right now in Pakistan, the Senate passed a resolution that states that the learning of Mandarin should be more facilitated for government contractors who are working in CPEC, which are like tens of thousands of people. So this is a huge injection of Mandarin. That's one thing. Another one would be perhaps yuanization, so more transactions done in the yuan as opposed to the dollar. This is also part of financial dominance, which goes back to economic dominance. You'd have more of the world's reserves kept in China. So now a lot of the world's gold reserves are kept in the US. But as China advances more and more in creating this BRI bandroll system, a lot of the world's money will be kept in the US. And also China will have more control of the world's assets. Actually, in Pakistan, for example, China bought a huge stake in Pakistan Stock Exchange. They'll just be more looking eastward instead of looking westward. I haven't really seen, like, the one thing that in my limited research, the one thing that I've seen the West has a clear advantage over China is media and being cool. You know what I mean? That kind of cultural hegemony thing. But the West, it's a hit and miss. Like in Lebanon, for example, liking the West is the political thing. If you want to emulate Western people and you listen to bands and stuff like that, it could associate you with being okay with America's support for Israel, and Israel is not popular where I'm from. And so I think China can take advantage of where the West has failed, because it has failed in some places. In some parts, the US talks about human rights and democracy, but at the same time, Saudi Arabia just allowed women to drive a few years ago. So some places are really fertile for China to come in and be like, okay, I'm your new hegemony now. But it's not going to do that as forcefully because, again, the EU and the US have a much more established presence on the world stage, especially in the Middle East. And in my research article, I argue that China has the power to make Lebanon one of its peripheries, but it failed to do so because it was already crushing competition from the U.S. and the EU. In fact, here's an example. In Lebanon, okay, the de facto governors of the country is Hezbollah. Hezbollah is an Iran-backed militia. Now, the problem is that Hezbollah is backing a corrupt government, and the president, his son-in-law, was beautifully slapped recently with American sanctions for corruption. Yet Hezbollah keeps backing him, and Iran keeps backing Hezbollah. When we had our revolution in 2019 that called for a better state, Hezbollah, the leader of Hezbollah, went on TV and said that we should look east towards China and its investments and not look at the West anymore. And this is because China does have the capacity, he thinks, to create, more power plants and bridges and so on and so forth, at a time when Lebanon still does not have 24-hour electricity, and we could really use the power plants. But after I did my research to find out why these projects haven't happened, there's many political and economic hurdles that China faces when dealing with Lebanon, such as a tumultuous political situation, such as the preeminence of the US and the EU, and their proxies preventing Chinese investment in this way. So Lebanon is kind of like, looks like it's going to be the border of the Belt and Road bound world system. Like, it's not going to completely take it. Maybe it'll focus on one place that I think is the port of Tripoli for various reasons. But that is one like battleground right there. So it's not going to be a complete one if the West maintains its grip, for better or for worse.